The next one we're going to talk about is Spain. Walking and wine in the heart of Catalonia. And the reason why I've put this behind Italy is because they're quite similar in many ways. They're very local trips. They stay very local. They only use a couple of destinations. You'll stay in the same place, 3 nights in Priorat and 3 nights up in the Montseny National Park. You can fly into Barcelona, have an extension there. So great walking, great food, great wine. So it's a similar kind of ethos to the Italian trip. Now, as I said at the beginning, one of the reasons why we decided to set these trips up at all was because of this journey that my wife and I made to Priorat back in 2017, I think it was. A friend of ours had a birthday party in a town called Sitges, which is just south of Barcelona. And another friend happens to own a tiny little vineyard in Priorat. And he said he'd been banging on about Priorat wine for ages. And I have to say, had given us some and we thought it was pretty delicious. So he said, if you're going there, just drive in. It's only 65 kilometers from the coast and you'll find a piece of heaven. And my goodness, did we ever. The landscapes of this place, the architecture of the little villages, and the wine, it's absolutely stunning. And there were no other tourists. We stayed in Priorat, the village here, with the vines all around. Every evening we would sit in the town square on our own with the locals, drinking wine and having a good time. And we stayed at this beautiful place called Calparera, which is where you will stay on the Wild Frontiers trip. We were looked after by a wonderful woman called Isabel, who speaks perfect English and was a great, great host. We went for some fabulous walks. This is my wife, Anna. Just absolutely stunning landscapes, as you can see here, and very varied. The 3 different walks we did were very different. We also went to this extraordinary place, which is a Carthusian monastery called Escala Dei, which I believe kind of means stairway to heaven. And you can see the landscape in which Escala Dei sits, and we will be doing a 3-hour round circuit hike of the monastery there. It was the monks of the monastery that really first developed wine in this region. We'll also visit a olive oil farm, a place for processing olive oil, and we'll be able to taste the olive oil there. But it's really the wine of Priorat that is so special. So if you like your wines big, your red wines big and bold, you're going to love this place. They do some really nice whites as well, I should say, but it's really the reds that are famous for Priorat. And that's really because they mainly use the Grenache grape. And as you can see here in the photograph on the left, the soil is really slaty, very steep-sided mountainside. So they can't have big vines. They're very small and they produce a tiny yield. But because the roots of the vines go deep, deep, deep into the ground, they pull up all the minerals and just make this absolutely delicious wine. Now, if you think that in Rioja, where they have more fertile soil, they will be producing something like 20,000 bottles per hectare. Here in Priorat, they're only producing 2,000 bottles per hectare, so not very much. And in fact, the story of Priorat wine is quite interesting because it was developed, as I say, by the monks of Escala Dei 1,000 years ago. But by the middle of the 20th century, it had all but fallen away. And these vineyards had crumbled into pretty much nothing. And they were really only being used by local farmers just making a local wine for local consumption. But in the early 90s, a wine producer from Rioja called Alvaro Palacios, who had learned his trade with no less than Petrus Winery in Pomeroy in Bordeaux, came to the region and started reviving it. And mainly through his signature wine, L'Ermita, turned this into one of Spain's premium wine regions. Now, if I told you that a bottle of wine can cost you nearly £1,200, you might be rather surprised, but that is what some of this wine costs. Not the wine we'll be trying. The wines generally are around somewhere between £18 to £30, or 25 euros to 50 euros. But there are fine wines here, like L'Ermita, which is over £1,000, which is a pretty extraordinary cost for a bottle of wine. From here, we will head up to Montseny Nature Park. where we will do more walking. We'll stay in a lovely guest house, but all this time we're just going to be our group in these places. There won't be other people, so we'll be within our bubble the entire trip, which will be fabulous. Lovely place to stay. From here we'll go walking in the beech forests, which are the southwesternmost beech forests of Europe. Also some lovely chestnut forests. We'll walk to the summit of one of the mountains, about 1,700 meters, from which you will get fabulous views both of the Pyrenees looking one way or the Mediterranean looking the other. Of course, it's important to stress, you know, whilst the walking on this trip it can be quite, I say challenging, but it's proper walking up to 1,700 meters. If you chose not to do that walk that day, of course, you very easily could and potter around the guest house. We'll be seeing other things, local pottery, pottery makers. As I say, there's a chestnut forest. And from that, we'll visit an organization that uses the chestnuts to make chestnut beer, chestnut pate, and chestnut chocolate, which will be interesting, before we return to Barcelona. So that's the Spanish trip. As I say, again, here's some more information about possible extensions to Barcelona or San Sebastian, 5 good walks, 6 hours being the longest, but and the height being 1,700 meters, the culture of winemaking, etc. So you can read that later. That's just to give you some